Member, you're over here.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Victorville, and the City Council sitting as authority, successor agency to the Victorville Redevelopment Agency, the Victorville Joint Powers Financing Authority, the Victorville Water District, and the City Council performing the housing functions of the former Victorville Redevelopment Agency. We do have a presentation of the Employee of the Month. Mr. Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm proud to honor Brandon Kales this month. He's actually the January Employee of the Month. I'm a little bit behind because of some other issues that I've been tackling. But Brandon has been a very valued member of this staff for a long time. He's one of the go-to guys in the city that a lot of folks go to when they need some interesting computer work done. In this case, he actually, on his own time, went out and obtained his Geographic Information Systems Professional certification, one of only about 5,000 worldwide, only less than 400 in the state of California. And Brandon essentially single-handedly, and I don't think I'm offending anybody in IT, but essentially single-handedly has run the city's GIS division for many years now. One employee who nominated him commented that he is the manager, although I know that he does have a manager. But he's the manager, he is the systems administrator, the programmer, the database analyst, the cartographer, and the technician, all depending on exactly what needs to be done. Were it not for Brandon, we really would not have much of a GIS system in place. So Brandon also recently obtained his bachelor's degree as well on his own time, even though the city suspended the payment for college classes several years ago. So Mr. Mayor, members of the council, if you'll join me in honoring Brandon.
Doug, I have to say, Brandon has always also single-handedly kept me logged onto my city computer.
That may have been a bigger job than the GIS. I don't know. He does actually. He's actually been parking in the Employee of the Month space because I announced it a couple of weeks ago. But he also gets a free detail, platinum detail from Griner GMC right next door, and a day off. Although I don't know if I'm going to honor that one with Brandon because we can't afford it. Friday. Yeah. Thank you, Brandon.
Well, I just noticed if council members could do the Alt-Tab thing, you will find your full agenda on our computer screen. And if it wasn't for Brandon, we wouldn't have that. So make sure that you Alt-Tab. Right, Brandon? Okay.
Okay.
All right, we'll go ahead and move into public comment. Do we have anyone wishing to address the council under public comment? Seeing no one, we'll go ahead and move into closed session, and I'll have our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor McEachran. There are 4 items listed on the agenda. However, we've made a determination at this point we do not need to go into the closed session on item number 2. Therefore, I would like to go into closed session on items number 3, 4, and 5. 3 is existing litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9A. It's the Carter Burgess versus City of Victorville litigation. Item number 4 is real estate negotiations pursuant to Government Code 54956.8, and the property and the negotiating parties are listed on the agenda. And item number 5 is also existing litigation pursuant to 54956.9A, and the parties and the parties and the case number are listed on the agenda. To the extent there is reportable action, we will come out and report that at the conclusion of the closed session or immediately prior to the 7 o'clock meeting.
All right, we'll now move into closed session. Good evening. I'd like to call back to order the regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Victorville, and the City Council sitting as the Library Board of Trustees, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency of the Victorville Redevelopment Agency, the Victorville Joint Powers Financing Authority, the Victorville Water District, and the City Council performing the housing functions of the former Victorville Redevelopment Agency. We'll have now any announcements out of closed session.
Thank you, Mayor McEachran. There were 4 items listed on closed session. However, we did not need closed session on item number 2. With respect to the other 3 items, the agenda is fully set forth, the subject matter of those closed sessions, and there is no reportable action with respect to those items.
All right, thank you. We'll now go into our invocation and pledge of allegiance. Invocation will be led by Minister John Bignan of Victor Valley Christian Church of Christ, and pledge of allegiance by our Police Chief Don Yoder.
Will you bow with me? Father, we just want to thank you for tonight. Pray for your presence at this meeting, that you be with the council members, each and every one of them, as they have to make decisions for our city and for our community. Pray that you give them wisdom and understanding in the decisions that they make, and those that are presenting their proposals, that you be with them as well. Father, I pray that we'll be a city, a community that is a light in our state, in our world, and that other cities will look upon us as a city of integrity and with pride. We thank you for your love and for your grace and your patience. It is in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I believe we have our City of Victorville Youth Advisory Committee here to make a presentation, so I'd like to call them up at this point.
Hi, my name is Megan Spadafora. I am the president of the Youth Advisory Committee. And this year, our group has decided to raise money for the High Desert Phoenix Foundation. And the High Desert Phoenix Foundation is a non-funded organization that helps families in need when a tragedy strikes.
Okay, so hi, I'm Autumn Lamb. I'm a member of the Youth Advisory Committee. Also, for our spring event, we are holding it at Hook Park on April 7th from 9 to 2 a.m. for all you guys that are interested. We have vendors out there. We are teaming up with the Bears for their spring egg hunt festival. So we're just raising money. All the proceeds are going straight to the Phoenix Foundation. So we're just raising money for them, and we're keeping it locally. Pretty much what we're doing is we're going to have vendors there. We're going to have food. We're going to have entertainment and hopefully like a DJ. So like just some music. So that way we can get our community involved with it and get some of their help for the donations. Also, we also brought tickets to sell to you guys today. We're doing an opportunity cost drawing. It's like Easter baskets for Easter. For any of you guys that are interested, we're selling them for $1, the tickets. And it's going straight to the Phoenix Foundation. But if you guys don't have any money on you guys today, or if you guys are actually interested in purchasing tickets, you can also send them to the community service. That's it. Anybody have any questions on what we're doing?
Well, no, but I would let you know that you can count on $250 from me, just to help you support your event. And I would challenge my other council members to do the same.
Hey, start the bid at $250, you know? Okay, thank you.
You'll sell me some, but not $250.
Oh, darn. Okay.
And all this money from the Phoenix Foundation stays in the High Desert, so it's going to a good cause.
So other than that, that's pretty much
Thank you
it.
for everything you're doing. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.
Leave a phone number over here, by the way.
Yeah, if you could, do you have a flyer or anything for your event that we can get out?
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, if we can get that out on the website and promote it locally, we'll do that as
Oh,
well.
thank you. Would you
You're
like my autograph too? You know, we might want to put that on there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I do have another presentation of Patriot Awards by Dean. And Dean, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name because my last name's hard enough to pronounce.
Dean Liquidopoulos.
Thank you.
I'll let you
My
go.
name is military, is Petty Officer First Class Dean Liquidopoulos. I work here at the city for the Administrative Services Department. Mr. Mayor, council members, just want to thank you for the opportunity to present these awards. I got kind of a bit of a speech here. So. Over the past decade of war, our great nation has endured fighting in many regions of the world. Our military has been put in harm's way many times, leaving their families at home worrying if they will ever make it back. But not just our active duty members that had to endure this. Over 40% of the men and women that's been placed in harm's way are Guard and Reserve members. Pre 9/11, the Guard and Reserve would rarely, if at all, be activated or called to war or called to anything. The traditional 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year has been a thing of the past after 9/11 and the fight on global terrorism. Many Guard and Reserve members have been called upon many times by this great nation to serve in harm's way. This makes it hard on families and hard on employers, especially employers. The Guard and Reserve members that work for different employers across the country, employers have to deal with them leaving constantly. For the past, 3 years, I've only been here maybe 6 or 8 months. I've been constantly 2 deployments, one in Iraq, one in Afghanistan, and then constant training to keep up with those. So we're always gone. So that puts a strain on employers. It puts a strain on family members. But not just family employers that hold the hardship and stress here. The biggest hardship and stress is on part of the part-time soldier. The soldier, the airman, the Marine, the sailor. Their job is to juggle all three. I got to juggle my family, my employer, and the military. So talk about the weight on my shoulders. But members hold their head high with pride and say, I'm glad to do it. With that said, I'm here on behalf of the Employer Support and Guard and Reserve, the Department of Defense, and the United States Navy, and award the Patriot Awards to Mr. Joe Haggard, IT Manager for Joe. Joe's my manager in the IT department and always shown consistent support for my duties, never questioning and always ready to go. Miss Tanya Thomas, which is in the back, she can come out too. Who was my previous manager until we made recent changes. And she had to endure 2 lengthy year-long deployments, so a total of 2 years of me being gone, and managed to do the whole thing. So I thank you for your support. And Mr. Doug Robertson, if you want to come on, city manager, who finally signed in a military leave policy that minimizes stress on the city as well as the member. So. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your continued support.
Thank you for your service to our country. We greatly appreciate it. All right, we'll now move into any revisions to the agenda and the city clerk's presentation of the agenda to the city council.
The City Council of the City of Victorville welcomes the public's participation in tonight's meeting. It is requested that all present please silence cell phones, pagers, and other electronic devices, and that personal conversations be kept to a minimum during the conduct of the meeting. Persons who wish to address the council on a specific item which appears on the agenda are requested to complete one of the white speaker cards that have been placed on the agenda table in the council chambers lobby and give it to the city clerk for the record prior to consideration of the item. The mayor will call upon each individual who has submitted a speaker card when the item comes up for discussion by the city council. The public comment period is the time and place for the general public to address the city council on any item within their jurisdiction that is not on the agenda. It is requested that a speaker card also be submitted to the city clerk for anyone who wishes to address the city council during the public comment period. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.3, state law prohibits the council from addressing any issue not previously included on the agenda. The council may receive testimony and set the matter to a subsequent meeting. Comments are to be limited to 3 minutes per speaker or less as deemed necessary by the mayor, depending upon the number of individuals desiring to speak. All communications are to be addressed directly to the city council. Individual comments to staff or members of the audience are not permitted. Individuals who fail to adhere to these guidelines may be asked to yield the floor. Any individual or group who engages in disruptive conduct during the meeting will be removed from the chambers by order of the mayor. Disruptive conduct includes, but is not limited to, addressing the council without being recognized, not addressing the subject before the council, repetitiously addressing the same subject, failing to relinquish the podium when requested to do so, verbal outbursts or comments from the audience. Thank you for your cooperation and adherence to these rules. All documents to be considered for approval at this meeting are before the council. Tonight, there are 2 revisions to the agenda on items number 17 and companion item 26 is on the dais for the council is the final version of the wastewater capacity and a treatment agreement in conjunction with those items. And there is a request by the staff to continue public hearing item number 14 and the companion item number 19 to the April 3rd meeting. Those are all the revisions I have, Mayor McEachran.
All right, thank you. I do have a request from our city manager to have an introduction of our new fire chief. Mr. Robertson?
If I could introduce Deputy County Fire Chief Dan Odom, who's going to introduce Victorville's newest fire chief, Don Trapp, who started yesterday, I believe.
Mayor, City Council, it's my pleasure tonight to come before you and introduce to you your new fire chief, who did start just yesterday, Don Trapp. He comes to us with 23 years of fire service experience. He's spent most of his career in the Valley area, although he has spent some time up in the mountains in Wrightwood. So he is here tonight, and I want to introduce him. A little bit about Don. He's had a lot of leadership positions throughout our department and has done an outstanding job in every one of those, done some special projects for the chief and I. So he comes to you with a lot of problem-solving experience, and I think he will be really good for your city. And if I could just 1 second thank Battalion Chief Mark Peebles, who has been in the acting position for about the last 6 to 8 weeks, and he's done a great job of keeping the train on the track as well, and we appreciate that. So your new chief, Don Trapp.
I just want to say,
It works.
I just want to say thanks. I'm honored and grateful to be here. I'm excited to get started. Honored to be your fire chief and to move forward and to continue with County Fire providing premier fire rescue and EMS services to the city, and anything I can do to help, I'm always here. Thank you.
Don?
Well, thank you, Don, and I appreciate if you'd reach out to all the council members and visit with them and share your thoughts on what you're going to do for the city of Victorville. We appreciate that. All right, now we'll move into public comment, and I have several public comment cards. Deborah Davis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. After the city clerk's announcement, I'm wondering if my public comment would better apply under agenda item number 18 or 17, the CDBG. I did fill out a card on each slot, but I don't know which one you would prefer.
We can put it back underneath that one.
Under the 18?
Yeah.
Or 17? Okay, I'll see you then.
Dorothy Miller.
Mayor and council members, I have 2 or 3 things that's really bothering me. We had finally got eucalyptus through for how many years we worked on it, and we finally got it through, and we got a wonderful signal over there, and we can get out across 395 without getting killed. Now, the other problem I have is Mesa Linda that goes from Sycamore back to Eucalyptus to go out. The road is not marked. There's no white line down it. There's a curb that sticks out. So it really needs to be taken care of before the city has another lawsuit with somebody getting killed out there. And I noticed the road work. They did a little bit there on Amethyst and Bear Valley, filling in the holes, and it's still not filled in very good. I think I could have done a better job, but that's beyond it. We don't have enough money to do anything, and it sounds like we're going down the tubes from the way the paper read this morning. And then the other thing I have is we're hollering about the money going out to the attorney. Okay, what happens? When we want to get somebody else in here, then we turn around and have another lawsuit going because of things that's going on, because somebody don't like our attorney that we've had for how many years. But things need to be straightened out. You guys need to sit up and take the plate. I've stood up here, I've told you what's happening many a times, and you all know it. Exactly what's happening. Things are not getting done. People are not doing their jobs the way they should. And this is where we're at. We're down the tubes. And you guys need to really look at this. I know we don't have money. We're out of money. But we've got to take care of things that's going to cause another lawsuit or another death. And that was one of my big things about Eucalyptus getting through to 395. And it has helped the fire department. They can get out to 395 now with a signal from the fire station back there. And that is just wonderful. And I think we really need to get working on things that really have to be done. And this is one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Tabor.
Good evening. I wanted to tell you I live in a really nice neighborhood. I live in Brentwood. But we had a really tragic incident in our neighborhood on March 13th. A man shot his wife and barricaded himself in the house. And first off, I want to thank the Victorville Police Department for their bravery and their actions. The man was arrested, and the woman was taken to the hospital. There was no loss of life. But I and others in the neighborhood are very, very, very concerned now about the damage done to the house. It sustained major damage during this incident. It's not just that the windows were broken, a whole back wall was, the stucco and everything was removed. The house is on a major artery into my neighborhood, so I venture to say hundreds of cars go by there every day. I go by there every day. The upstairs, all of the windows in the upstairs are completely blown out, and the stucco has been removed. Frankly, it looks like something you'd see on the nightly news in a war zone. It's really damaged. It's not just that it's an eyesore. It's just inviting more crime. I'd like to ask the city to follow up on this incident and make sure that the property is secured. I think normally homeowners would do this, but they're not available. You know, the man is in jail, and the woman, I assume, is still in the hospital. She's not there. And I've talked to the neighbors, and nobody is in the home right now. Again, today's March 20th. It happened 1 week ago, and the house is it's completely open. Not to secure it isn't to invite more crime. To say Goodwill High School is just around the corner. And I feel sure the police don't want to have to go back out there now and solve another crime because this house is just, it's open. All the fences were, all the wooden fences on both sides and the adjacent homes, they're all down. So anybody can get into the backyard. And I'm sure that people looking for mischief will find it there. I'd also like to ask that the police department follow up, or you know, whoever's responsibility it would be, somebody to follow up with the neighbors. I stopped and talked to them. I'm in the neighborhood about 2 blocks away. But the people who live right next door, they're somewhat traumatized, and they're overwhelmed. They have major damage to their property too, and they don't know what to do. If there's a procedure, you know, for them to get it fixed, you know, or to get reimbursed or whatever, I'm sure they'd like to know. The police investigation vehicle, it was parked there for a couple of days, but I don't think the neighbors still, they don't know what to do. I had another point I wanted to make. It's not just that it's my neighborhood, it's our town. And right now it looks like a war zone, and it's inviting more trouble. So I'd like for it to be followed up on. Okay, thank you.
Paul Chason.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and city staff. It's Paul Chassie. I'm a volunteer at the California Route 66 Museum, and I also serve on the board of directors there. Tonight, I'd just like to talk a little bit about Route 66. We've seen a lot of publicity about it lately, and so I thought I'd share a few things with you. A lot of people think the tourist season is the summer season, but that's not necessarily true along Route 66, especially at our museum. We're an all-year tourist business, although the number is a little bit lower in this time of the year. But this is the time of year we get the business from Brazil, Australia, New Zealand. I can almost count every week I'm seeing a family come in from Brazil just to stop at the museum because it's on Route 66. We're also seeing the Chinese coming by. As you know that, or you may or may not know that the Chinese government and the American government kind of relaxed their visa policies, and we expect to see an increase in Chinese tourists this year. In fact, in January of this year at our museum, we hosted close to 100 Chinese foreign exchange students over a 4-week period. So they know we're out there. We've also hosted several documentary filming from the Chinese national TV network this past year. So, let's say we do expect to see a lot more this summer, but how do we attract these people? We want them to come to Victorville and not just drive by on the way to Vegas. Well, one way is signage. Hopefully you've seen the county road marker that is new, the blue and gold sign that's out there on Route 66 out towards Oro Grande. The county just recently installed several of these signs at the freeway off-ramp at D Street, pointing to Route 66. And I'm not sure if the city has received a request from the county to install these signs along Route 66 within the town, but I believe they need a resolution from the city to do that. And the county is ready and willing to put the signs up if it hasn't already been done. And the cost is very minimal, and museum volunteers will be glad to help you put the signs up if you need the help. And you may have noticed, or I'm sure you've seen, a couple of weeks ago we had a presentation on a proposed mural at the museum. The announcement went out in the papers recently. We're getting a lot of requests for volunteers to work on the mural. We're getting a lot of requests for sponsors. We would hope to get that done before the 2012 Route 66 International Festival is being hosted here in Victorville. And I think that will be I know it will be a worldwide attraction on the internet, and people from all over the world will be using it as a photo op like they do currently for the museum. They'll just make it more spectacular. So speaking of signage, tell you a little bit of story. 3 or 4 years ago, you may remember there was a brand new brick building erected on 7th Street on the east side, about halfway down. It's an auto repair shop. Very, very well done brick building. It looks like a 2-story building. When that building first went up, the developers had the foresight to put this beautiful Route 66 shield on the building, which is still there today. And when that building started going up and the sign went up, we started getting calls at the museum. Are we moving there, or is it in the museum? What's going on? Well, that got my curiosity, so I went down there and found it was just an auto body shop. But they recognized the importance of Route 66. And in fact, we had to start stocking them with brochures because people coming in here to find out what's going on with Route 66. So that kind of led me to think, with the festival coming up this year, what could Victorville do relatively inexpensively to let people know that they're on Route 66? The travelers, and they come in and use them all the time, say, where's Route 66? A lot of them don't see the signage in California especially. They see it in Oklahoma, they see it every other Route 66 state. But when they hit that border, it's like, where is it? And if they don't have the guidebook, it's very difficult. So the county's having this now, and maybe the city, and not the city particularly, but the business people in the city could help us this year very inexpensively. If you drive down 7th Street between Palmdale Road and D Street, how many businesses are there? A couple hundred? I don't know. Probably 200 or more. How many of those have a Route 66 sign on their building? Besides Larry Huber here and a few others. Just think, for very minimum money, each business for, $25, $50, it's a pretty small Route 66 sign or even a bigger one on their business. So when the tourists come into town and I direct them up to Route 66 on 7th Street, they'll know they're on Route 66. And what those tourists going to do, they're going to stop in, whether it's a liquor store or a garage or a restaurant. They're going to say, wow, we're on Route 66, let's just stop in for a minute. So just a suggestion, and I hope the city will continue to support Route 66, and we're looking for a great year. Thank you very much.
Paul, what is the cost of the sponsorship to help paint the mural? You had said that you wanted to sponsor it, but you didn't say how much.
Yeah, for the sponsorship, we have 2 levels. If you want your logo or name on the mural itself, and you may have seen the sign at the bottom, we have sponsored by. We have a few positions available for small businesses, and it's $500. Anything less than that, you'll be recognized as a donor to help support the sign and its ongoing maintenance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Snedeker.
It's not bright enough down here. 654 pages for you to review tonight's agenda. Did you read them? Hope you've passed them first to know what's in them. Just took me all afternoon just to skim over them. I wondered if you noticed how much interest would be paid in outstanding bonds the city of Victorville is now required to pay. How many of you members have ever heard of Agenda 21? Just in a nutshell, this is a government control of all land use and removal of rights from private property owners. This is a movement that began with the United Nations, using the affluence of Americans and transferring wealth to second-tier nations. Now, I know you're all thinking that I'm another conspiracy theorist, but I'm here to inform you, if you haven't heard about Agenda 21, this is going to be a hot ticket item, okay? So just make a note of it, maybe pull it up on your computer, take a look at Agenda 21. I'm here tonight because this does affect me, okay? The following is a list of key words used by governments that will eventually take away private property rights. I'm sure you've all heard of these. Social justice, organizing, facilitating, smart growth, urban growth, pro-growth, regulatory planning, sustainable development, public-private growth, conservation easements, sustainable medicine, that's all actually Obamacare, EPA, redevelopment, human habitation, property rights council, general plans, social engineering, community rights, greater good for the community. By the way, that's what China does. Okay? Unelected board members, okay, or unelected agencies who really make plans for the rest of us. In our case, that also could be the Planning Commission, okay? They're really one and the same. And I know you're thinking this is all far-fetched, and you have to understand that I am not very eloquent with words. That's why I want you to study up on Agenda 21, because there's been something taking place in our nation for quite some time, and we just need to wake up. Okay? Last month, Development Director Webb gave a detailed explanation of the Planning Commission meeting where there was an item was heard and the reasons they denied the CUP for PLN 11-00015. I think you all know what I'm referring to. Okay? Diana Carloni, attorney for the applicant Heidi Hart, addressed the Planning Commission's denial, stating the reasons council should grant the appeal and reverse the decision of the Planning Commission. Ms. Carloni presented council with a written brief she prepared that addressed those issues. Council member Kennedy was a property owner. I imagine he removed himself from the vote. However, during the meeting towards the Planning Commission, I understand Mayor Caldwell spoke to the Planning Commission, and anyway, the decision was upheld. However, all of you who were here that night felt that you're going to stand behind the Planning Commission. Okay. Now, did you hand out those little maps that I asked you? Thank you very much. Just to recognize that Walmart, Bear Valley, the citizens overwhelmingly don't want it there. Okay? Nevertheless, when I say citizens, referring to those who live nearby. Okay? Now, we're talking about something that's on the big upscale for the city. I want to break it down. I'll give you a little map. 7 liquor stores within 3/4 of a mile of my place of business. Not to mention the bus stop that's right in front of my door where all the people camp out on my stairs, okay? Is this the same Planning Commission that feels that 175 individuals on probation are going to affect the area near the courthouse? Or would you like to count the number of individuals who take the bus that's in front of my business, or count the number of individuals who enter into the liquor store 2 doors down from me? I'm not zoned to have a farmer's market in front of my store. Imagine that. I can't sell fruits and vegetables out inside in front of my place of business. Okay? The city council has the power to control the planning department. I've been studying up on it, so now we understand where the power does stop. Okay? And I just want you to understand that you're all on record. Your voting records are published. And this has now become something that's affected my pocketbook, my way of life. And I am proactive, need to be more. This was introduced to me, the Agenda 21, I ran into it, a Tea Party movement, and I'm telling you that they thought the Tea Party was going to be squashed at the last election. This item is not going around. There is a furor out there in regards to property rights. Okay? All government is local government. And we need to start thinking about, we need to recontrol what's going on in the communities instead of just having nothing but concern about what's taking place in our nation. And what about the Constitution and the body of law? Why would you want to run through the gauntlet and yet another unelected board that's going to play favorites? And I mean this, okay? Favorites, winners or losers, who's going to pick them? You know, with your rights. In other words, you don't want parolees bringing down property values near your city hall, but you seem to not care about my property, nor the individuals at Spring Valley Lake. That sounds like hypocrisy to me. Okay? The same planning commission you turned down.
Can you please bring it to a close? You've gone way over 3 minutes.
I apologize. The same planning commission you're putting so much trust in, think about why are liquor stores okay, but next to where you do business, it's not okay. Think about that. Your children are going to suffer from the property rights that you guys are planning now, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Powers?
Good evening. I'm here to talk about Old Town, and I would like to start with asking a question. I would like to know, and I may have missed calling and have not asked, but I would like to know if there's permits given to the 3 marijuana dispensaries that are downtown on 7th Street. The main and most obvious one where they're doing the wiggly signs is right on D and 7th. And I just wonder if there are actual permits for them to be using those 3 areas for dispensing. And that's my first question. The other one is I have a fact sheet that Corey Lopez, she's with the Institute for Public Strategies. I will give these to all the council members, and I will go through the city clerk on that. But it talks about the spice and the bath salts, and I know she's going to be giving a talk on that probably to the council in the future. But I have flyers, so I'll pass those out. We are finding on 6th and C, we're finding a lot more of the syringes that, and I don't know that much about the syringes, and I just saw one, but there's a lot more activity there on 6th and C. We don't know whether that means bath salts or what it means, or whether it means marijuana, but apparently these spices and bath salts can be used in any form or fashion. Very dangerous, and just more drugs going down on 7th Street. We see more homeless coming through. There are also homeless couples. We met one on Saturday that was, or no, it was Monday, and there was a couple with a 3-month-old child, and they were kicked out of some apartment and were looking for a place to live. And they've been all over that area, and they only have $500 for total welfare, and there are no rentals in the whole entire city for $300 a month. So so one of our big problems is, to me, welfare, the homeless, and the prisoner releases, and the river bottom. So we also found out just recently that the pedophiles that were at Queens are now located at the river bottom. They were sent out of Queens, and that and so I'm just wondering, what can the city council do, or the city mayor? There's a lot going on, and to me, these should be addressed very seriously. City, does the city have empty buildings for the homeless? What can be done? I think that's a question you really need to look at, because it affects not just Old Town. We see it very clearly, and we see the prisoners coming down, the new people coming down and heading toward the river bottom. So I think you really ought to take a look at this seriously, and it's probably true in a lot of the other areas of Victorville, but please check that out. Thank you very much.
All right, that's all the cards I have under public comment. I do have other cards under items for tonight's agenda. So we'll move on to our normal agenda items. Library Board of Trustees, we have no items at time of posting. Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, we do have a request for the council to receive and file the Southern California Logistics Rail Authority basic financial statements dated June 30th, 2011. Mr. Robertson, would it be appropriate for us to take all agency items at this time?
Yes, it would. And in fact, tonight we have the partner from Meyer Hoffman McCann, Mr. Ken Alamam. He's a new partner for the City of Victorville's audits, and he has a brief presentation to give to the council regarding the city's financial statements in whole.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mayor, City Council, I'm pleased to present the results of your annual financial statement audit to you today. The scope of the audit includes the audit of the city's financial statements, which includes all the legal entities that are subject to the control and oversight of City Council. The financial statement audit process also includes the separate financial statements for each one of those legal entities for the financial statements issued separately for each component unit. I want to make just a few brief comments regarding the audit process. Management is responsible for the presentation of financial statements being in accordance with accounting standards and for the proper maintenance of accounting records. The auditor is responsible for testing those records and the financial statements to measure the risk of significant misstatement that is present in the financial statements. When the risk is low, the auditor gives an opinion without qualification that the financial statements are fairly stated. It's important to note that a financial statement audit is focused on the dollar amounts in the accounting records and the financial statements, and it's focused on identifying significant misstatements. A financial statement audit is not an evaluation of management practice or public policy. We previously, a few weeks ago, met with the audit committee. We discussed the results of the audit process, went over each recommendation, reviewed the financial statements with the audit committee, and questions were received and answered from the audit committee. Our audit testing supports an opinion without qualification that the financial statements of the city are fairly presented in all material respects. The opinion also draws the reader to Note 21, which comments further on the financial status of the city. As required by auditing standards, our audit report itemizes the audit adjustments that were detected by the audit process and the recommendations that related to those adjustments, as well as a number of other recommendations that were noted as a result of our testing. We went over each one of these in detail with the audit committee when we met with them a few weeks ago. The financial statements show that in 2011, general fund expenses exceeded revenues by $3.8 million. Fund balance of the general fund declined from $7.5 million to $3.1 million. Note 21 discloses in detail the plans of management with regard to these events. In the redevelopment agency financial statements, in 2011, the expenses of the redevelopment agency exceeded revenues by approximately $2 million. I do want to make a few brief comments about the status of all redevelopment agencies in the state of California. Because of actions taken by the state legislature in June of 2011 that was recently upheld by the state Supreme Court, all of the redevelopment agencies in California are in winding down mode. No new projects can be initiated, and in future fiscal years, successor agencies to the redevelopment agency will only receive enough property tax revenue that's sufficient to meet the cash flow requirements of enforceable obligations that were in effect as of the date that the law was enacted. In 2011, the Airport Authority had expenditures that exceeded revenues and transfers by $5.8 million. This includes the impacts of $5.6 million of depreciation. As required by auditing standards and accounting standards, the financial statements of the authority disclose the insufficiency of pledged revenue in 2011 and the use of reserve proceeds to pay required debt service installments in December of 2011. In VEMUS, in 2011, expenses exceeded revenues by $2.7 million. This reflects the impacts of $1 million of depreciation and a number of one-time type of expenditures. Carter and Burgess legal cost of $1.9 million and an SCE settlement cost of $920,000. As of June 30, 2011, the liabilities of VEMUS exceeded assets by about $76 million. It should be noted that the city won its lawsuit involving Carter and Burgess, and the court has ordered Carter and Burgess to pay the city of Victorville $52 million. Carter and Burgess has appealed this court decision. Under accounting rules, the financial statements are not permitted to reflect this extremely favorable outcome until all of the contingencies associated with this very favorable gain have been realized. The Victorville Water District in 2011, the Water District expenses exceeded revenues by $1.8 million. Net assets increased by $4 million due to capital contributions. And in 2011, there was significant investment of Water District resources in needed capital improvements. I do want to thank staff for the assistance and cooperation we received throughout the audit process. In accordance with best practice, most of the disclosures that are present in the financial statements were actually drafted by Finance Department staff. We appreciate the professionalism that was extended to our audit team throughout the audit process. Throughout the audit process, the staff worked with the audit team to ensure that all items were properly presented in the financial statements and that all reportable audit conditions were disclosed with full transparency. And that concludes my comments for today.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from council?
Not necessarily for the auditor, but for Doug. Why is it, again, that we didn't do the MD&A?
It comes down to a matter of time. We spent most of our time working with the auditors on the numbers portion of the audit and working on the note disclosures, which are a required portion of the audit. The MD&A is something that is still a goal to get to, and I cannot guarantee it would happen next year, but I would certainly hope that it will.
It makes me concerned that we're not doing it, maybe because we can't come up with a discussion and analysis. We don't even know what's going on. So it just doesn't look good. So we need to make it a priority. So we can have. I really think that you're struggling to explain it. I mean, how would you explain that our expenses exceeded revenues, but we were giving raises to the staff? We were, absorbing the RDA staff when every other city let them go, and not paying bond debt. It just shows that. I think that the reason why we're not doing it is because you can't explain it.
I have to disagree with that, actually. In fact, as you know, as a finance director for another local agency, those items occurred after the close of the fiscal year, so they would not be included in this audit. Additionally, the retention of employees or the fact that we did or did not give cost of living increases to the employees is not something that is audited, except to the extent that we gave out the cost of living at the rate that was approved by the council.
I just think it looks unprofessional.
There's a lot of things that happen in this meeting that look unprofessional, unfortunately.
Yeah, Mr. We're both accountants. We understand the concept of depreciation. Mm-hmm. We know that when we buy an asset and it has long-term life, 10 years, 20, 30 years, we pay for that asset. It might be $1 million asset. If it has a 20-year life, that means the cost of that asset every year. I'm never good at math in my head. Ken, how much? $5 million?
Me either.
Okay, we've got an annual cost for depreciation. But the outlay occurred in the year we bought the asset. In our financial statements this year, we're looking at what overall citywide expenses in excess of revenues of about $24 million, I think, citywide. All the what portion of that was depreciation? Can you remember off the top?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I could look it up in the financials if you'd like.
My look at the financial statements indicated it was about $25 million in total. Mm-hmm. My point being that even though we have to account for depreciation as a cost, and it is, mm-hmm. I don't argue that point, it is not a cash outlay on an annual basis. So when we look at the revenues and expenses of operating the city, when we look at it without factoring in the non-cash expense of depreciation, it appears to me that the city's about at a break even. Would you agree with that? Do you think that's close?
I think that's fair. If you look at the city as a whole, and in my analysis, I was focusing on certain specific funds, but that is a correct statement, I believe.
Thank you.
Okay.
The only thing I'd like to add, and we went through this on the audit committee, and for the folks that are here in the audience, you know, I've been on the council for 3 years now, going on my 4th year, and every year that I've been on the council, we were basically going to be done, and yet we're still here.
That's true.
What do you have to say regarding that? I mean, the reality is that your going concern, yet justified by the numbers, is not justified by the reality. The reality is that for the last 3 years, your firm and firms previous to you have basically said that the city of Victorville is a going concern and probably will not exist beyond June 30 of the current year. Yet we continue to exist. And so I've got an interchange being built. I've got several Walmart supercenters under construction or getting ready to go under construction. What my question to you as a professional, okay, as the auditor of this city, is you place a going concern on this city, and you've done it for the last several years, but yet you're still here in front of us. Can you explain that?
It's an excellent question. And when an auditor gives a going concern opinion, it is not meant to imply that there's certainty that the city will be unable to pay its bills as they become due without extraordinary measures. But it's meant to draw attention to the financial condition of the entity and to indicate that there's enough uncertainty that the reader of the financial statements should be cautious in approaching the financial statements. So it's not to predict the future or meant to give a conclusive, certain depiction of a future condition of the city, but simply to draw attention to conditions that merit some consideration. And in a situation where post-balance sheet reserves had to be used to pay debt service payments, and there's been a number of years where expenditures have exceeded revenues, and including the audit period, for the general fund, again, focused on the general fund. Those are not normally circumstances under which the audit firm would feel comfortable reversing the position taken on that.
You know, I think it's important to put an underline on the statement, what was included in your statement. The going concern modification does not predict the future.
Right.
It does not say that the city is going to fail or that it won't be in business. It uses the term substantial doubt, and it's the substantial doubt in the mind of the auditors, substantial doubt about our ability to continue. And it doesn't necessarily mean 2 months, 6 months. It might. And if we don't fix the things that are financially wrong in the city, I mean, conceivably it could fail. And our job, and it has been our job over the last couple of years, is to fix what's wrong. And I think we're moving in that right direction.
And that could very well be while you're still here. Yeah. 3 years later, you guys have done a lot of the right things. And
well,
so you should
and
be proud of that.
I think that that's the point. I mean, to Doug's earlier comments, this council has moved in that direction over the last 3 years. We understand that we've got things that we need to fix, and we've been working in that direction. I think it's a little bit frustrating from my position, as well as from other members of this council up here, to hear you have a continuing going concern. You've done this over the last 3 years, and yet we're still here. And so the going concern seems to spell out that we are going to be done. The city would cease to exist in a couple of months. Yet, again, I will repeat, I'll go back to what I said earlier. We have an interchange under construction. We have one Walmart supercenter that's under construction, another one that's getting ready to break ground. There are a lot of good things going on in this city. Sales tax revenue is back up the last 5 quarters. so nearly a year and a half, we've seen sales tax increase, and yet there's some inclination by our auditor that we won't be around come June 30 of 2012. And I think that if we look back over the last 3 years, and that same inclination has been opinioned, and yet we're still here. I mean, the fact that you're here before us tonight ought to send a message to the world that even though you give that opinion, it means absolutely nothing. Would you agree?
Well, again, the purpose of that language is just to draw the reader's attention to indicators that merit some consideration. But again, I just want to reiterate that I think a lot of the success story that you have to tell is that this city has done a lot of brave and courageous things to keep your finances going to the degree that they have. And it's just very impressive, the cost cutting that the city has had the courage to make in the recent years.
Mike, just one thing. I have to disagree with the mayor, and I don't disagree with him on too many things. I'm one of his yes men, as we all know. But I have to disagree with him. That opinion doesn't not mean anything. It means exactly what it says. And since I'm also an auditor by profession, it's not our job to come in and be optimistic. That's not what auditors do. Our job is to anticipate the worst, look for all the possible negatives, and make sure that the reader is aware of whatever could be a problem. It's not our job to come in and wave the flag. That's just the way we do our work.
You said it better than I. Appreciate that.
Yeah, well.
Councilmember.
Yeah, just to clarify one point in the terms of the redevelopment agency, and I don't know what that number is. It could be 100 million, 300 million. It's an irrelevant number at the moment simply because the state has taken it off the table. So whatever in debt is incurred in terms of redevelopment agencies, it's a moot question. The formula that comes in out of Sacramento, whether they like it or not, they're going to have to pick up that debt. It might be more here, less in another RDA, and take all of those debts and pay that down. As an accounting firm, once that is cleared, and it hasn't cleared yet, there's a lot of rules and a lot of nuances that have to be dealt with, and you have to understand them, we have to understand them. But once that's done, it seems to me that RDAs as a debt factor to any city within the state of California are a moot question. That entire debt belongs to the state that's simply cycling through the subcommittees here down to our level to pay off our portion of it. But it's a moot question. Whether it's 100 million or 200 million, it doesn't matter anymore, does it?
You've made a very insightful observation. As a matter of fact, the California Society of CPAs is working very closely with the Accounting Standards Board, GASB, and GFOA, which is a financial body for local governments, to make sure that the financial statements reflect what you just described, which is really, to a large degree, this debt has been walled off, if you will, with a dedicated revenue stream that is protected by AB X126, and it's really it's something that we're working with the GASB and the GFOA to make sure that properly gets recognized. So good observations.
All right, well, thank you for your presentation. Obviously, this is just a receive and file. We did receive this back on February 15th, I believe. But your presentation is more formal here tonight.
Correct.
But again, I'd like to reiterate my thoughts on the fact that you're even, in fact, here.
We agree to disagree.
The fact is that a going concern would seem to indicate that we shouldn't even be here tonight.
We'll predict that you'll be here next year.
Yeah, we'll predict that you'll be here next year.
Okay. I'm sure.
All right.
I look forward to it.
Thank you, Ken. All right.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is under the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority's agenda item number 10. This is a request to ratify the lease for real property, Building 739, by and between the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, and the Southern California Logistics Airport, SCLAA.
Motion by Councilmember Baez, second by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrales. Motion carries unanimously.
Agenda item number 11 is a request to approve a general services provider agreement by and between the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority and the Serco Management Services, Inc. for air traffic control tower service.
Mr. Mayor, if I might just add a couple of elements of discussion to this. Won't change the recommendation at all. But we've been contracting as the airport for air traffic control tower services. One of the exciting things for the airport is that we've been a part of what's called the Federal Contract Tower Program, and I raise that to your attention particularly because it's a debated discussion item right now, especially as it relates to the President's budget and trying to trim some of the budget of the FAA, and that particular program has been identified as potentially being impacted, and we're monitoring it very closely, not sure necessarily if it will impact us, but our contract or our tower operation is largely paid for by the FAA. We've modified our hours. We used to operate 24 hours a day under this federal program. We get about 14 hours of free coverage, and then we supplement the coverage of ATC service, mainly at nighttime when we have flight testing operations or when we have passenger traffic that's on commercial charter. We'll actually ramp up tower services. So effectively, this agreement is for the supplemental service above and beyond what the FAA actually pays for us. But to give an order of magnitude, if this contract is seeking up to $75,000 of funding to supplement the contract, we're getting or we're enjoying the benefit of just over $400,000 of paid-for costs by the FAA because of the status of our airport and the type of our airport.
Keith, your staff report says that it's I thought it was a 4-hour-a-day consistent number, but you're suggesting that might just be an average 4 hours a day? We're over and above the 14?
It fluctuates. For example, our standard operations are 6 o'clock in the morning is when we actually open the tower, and we'll shut it down at 8 o'clock. Monday through Thursday, we have very traditional flight test operations that come out of March Air Force Base. They're typically referred to as covert or SLAM. They're nighttime flight testing operations. And when they are operating those days, typically they extend us to about 10 o'clock at night. But it's not uncommon, especially when we're getting overseas flights in that are commercial charter, that are scheduled by the Army as a part of the troop rotation. They fly in on what's called the Part 121 certificate, and those are your air carriers like Southwest Airlines, Continental, Delta, those types. And those types of aircraft will require tower service or they won't land at your facility. So we'll actually stand up in those cases beyond the traditional hours just to accommodate that flow of traffic.
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Councilmember Rothschild. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 13, which is request for, and companion to City Council item number 23, request for council to approve a letter of credit extension and amendment. Doug, you want to speak to this issue?
Sure. This came about in 2007. The City Council, the Joint Powers Finance Authority, entered into an agreement, letter of credit agreement, in order to secure some bonds for the Foxborough Power Plant. It's been well publicized that that plant was not successful, and ultimately those long-term bonds were not able to be taken out as part of that financing scheme. So this issue comes before you tonight. It was intended to originally be a temporary issue, but it has unfortunately become long-term due to the failure of that power plant. At this point, the letter of credit expires in May. There is a notice requirement coming up 2 days from tonight that would cause these bonds to probably spike in interest. and also eventually in May they would become bank bonds if ultimately this letter of credit is not approved by both parties. The staff report lines out the intended use of the funds, of the proceeds of the Carter and Burgess judgment, should we ultimately prevail in that judgment. It essentially was a negotiation between myself and the staff at BNP Paribas, eventually involving our legal counsel, bond counsel, and their counsel as well, to finalize the term sheet that is before you today. Effectively, it provides what I and the staff at BNP Paribas agree is the best way for the city to ultimately get out of this letter of credit and obtain long-term financing. It assists the city in removing much of the interfund borrowing that has occurred as a result of the BMOOS-Foxborough bonds, or excuse me, the BMOOS-Foxborough plant, and ultimately that waterfall, if you will, to the housing bond funds that were also lent as somewhat not part of that project, but as a result of that internal borrowing. So ultimately, there's been a little bit of confusion on this, that somehow BNP Paribas is going to get this money. They are not. In fact, this is all city dollars when we ultimately prevail in that appeal. And this agreement would set in place just the planned expenditure of those dollars on the city's behalf. Approximately half of that money would go to buy down the bonds, both in payments and then also in a one-time buy down, and the other half would be used to improve the city's fiscal condition such that we can eventually take out those bonds with a long-term financing. There are some other relatively minor changes to the letter of credit agreement involving a slight rate increase, still well below market rates. And also one other key issue that we seem to come upon fairly regularly right now, and that has to do with the leased facilities having requests for cell towers be placed on them, and us needing to go back and forth in order to get those cell towers placed in order to provide cellular service to the citizens of Victorville. So aside from those comments, I'm open to answering any questions you might have on this issue.
No, just a comment that we don't have a choice at this point to do this. Otherwise, it would be disastrous. Like you said, an interest in what would come due. But once again, this is due to poor management.
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by
I just have to say, I think the court that heard the case did not come to that conclusion.
That was for one part of the case.
That the problem with that plant
electricity
was
rates, but you don't.
Excuse me.
You don't keep
All right, okay, hold on. I will allow each of you to speak in concurrence. Mr. Kennedy, I'll let you go first. Spies second.
That's not the decision of the court. The court concluded that it was bad engineering and seriously flawed advice that the council relied on from the engineers who promoted and carried that project to its catastrophic conclusion. That's what the court decided.
That was only one part, and those were for the equipment. But the management, I mean, you secure electricity rates, but you don't secure fuel rates on generators. It was going to fail anyways. So it just so happens that you had somebody that we actually had to go out and hire a different attorney to win the case because this one couldn't do it.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify that statement, the City Council authorized hiring an engineering specialized firm so that we could present the best case possible. Mr. D. Bartnowski's firm provides legal counsel for regular city issues, redevelopment issues, but they are not engineering experts. And it was because of hiring that other firm that we were actually successful in the case, in my opinion.
By Councilmember Kennedy, second by Councilmember Rothschild. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, under the Victorville Water District, agenda item number 14, as well as companion to City Council item number 19, we are going to continue those?
Yes, after the public hearing is opened and any testimony taken, the staff is requesting that the hearing be continued to April 3rd.
All right, I'll open the public hearing on agenda item number 14 and 19, 14 on the Victorville Water District, 19 on the City Council agenda. Anyone wishing to address the council on those items? All right, seeing no one, we will go ahead and continue those items. The date again?
April 3rd.
April 3rd. All right, agenda item number 16 is a request to accept the mid-year budget review. Doug?
This item, although there is a mid-year budget review for both the city and the water district, we agendize these separately, not as sister items, because the water district item is essentially just an error on staff's part for not carrying over some funds for the Munis project that we're engaged in, because we didn't carry over those funds, or at least enough of those funds. We need to come back to you at this point to make that authorization. The cost of the project hasn't changed. It was just simply an oversight as we put the budget together and did those carryover resolutions.
Mr. Robertson, the mid-year budget review talks about the use of reserves and some mid-year budget requests. I don't recall that these have come to the council. Are they going to come?
I think you're talking about the city's mid-year budget review, which we are actually agendized separately. So if you could hold those questions.
I'll hold that question.
The Assistant Director of Finance, Ms. Adele Mosier, has a presentation when we get to the city portion. This was a fairly simple item that was really more of an oversight than a new appropriation.
All right. We'll move on to agenda item number 17. This is a companion to City Council item number 26. This is a request to approve the wastewater capacity and treatment agreement with Church and Dwight, Inc. to accept and treat their industrial waste at SCLA Industrial Wastewater Treatment Plant. Mr. Metzler or Mr. Robertson?
Actually, I believe Brian Gingler would be the one to come down and speak on this item. Sean McGlade is not available this evening. I do have a question for the city clerk, though. Was item 16 approved? Was there a vote taken on 16?
No vote taken on that item.
Okay, we do actually need action on 16 in order to approve and accept and approve the mid-year budget request, because there is an additional appropriation associated with it.
Then we'll back up to that agenda item.
Okay, can you explain to me again what this is? It's an appropriation or a mid-year budget review is what it says in my agenda.
It is both an appropriation and a mid-year budget review. It's a mid-year budget review that is indicating that there is an additional appropriation needed in order to complete the project that was started last fiscal year, possibly the early or late into the fiscal year prior.
So there's no increase in the project, but you need more money?
We need to appropriate the dollars in this fiscal year because we did not appropriately carry them over from last year.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Cabriella, second by Councilmember Kennedy. Motion carries unanimously.
Mr. Gangler on agenda item number 17 and City Council item number 26.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This is a request to approve a contract with Church and Dwight for industrial wastewater treatment at our treatment plant. It's a fairly small contract and it's variable, but we have the capability of treating their waste, and the net effect would be that there would be no cost to the city. In fact, there would be a positive revenue over the expenses, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
All right, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I got this, and I read what was in the agenda, so what is the difference?
There were some minor changes to the language, very non-substantive, and we request to make those changes. However, there were just in a few spots some adjustments that were made through the city attorney's office that they're aware of, and we're just requesting that you give the authority to make those non-substantive changes to the agreement.
Yeah, the draft you have that was added to the dais is slightly different with, again, as Mr. Gangler suggested, non-substantive changes. So we would request that you approve the item on the agenda with essentially those changes, which are non-substantive in nature.
So the dollar amounts are not changed?
Correct.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrales.
Just one other question. I thought it was interesting that the product that will be trucked to the plant is a soap kind of product.
Basically, yes.
And I'm no chemist, but we know there's base and there's acid. Are those and they tend to offset one another. And the problem we've had with Dr. Pepper product has been that it's acidic, and this will have a neutralizing benefit?
It could potentially be a benefit in the treatment process, yes.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrales, second by Councilmember Rothschild. Motion carries unanimously.
Yeah.
All right, agenda item number 18, I'm going to hand this over to Mayor Pro Tem Rudy Cabrales. There are members of those that have submitted for these grants that are member clients of my insurance firm, so I feel it appropriate that I abstain on this issue.
Item 18 is a public hearing called to receive citizen and agency comments regarding the city's needs and strategies for 2012-2017 and for the annual action plan, and 2, to receive testimony to consider applications for projects that have been submitted to the city for HCD grant for fiscal year 2012-2013. I will now open up the public hearing on item 18. Anyone wishing to speak to item 18, please come to the podium.
Excuse me, Mayor. I'm going to have to recuse myself on a similar.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, if I might, maybe just introduce a little bit more, just to give a little bit of background. And I'm not sure if we have cards. I thought maybe we had cards individually to call those respective speakers up.
I believe we have at least 2 cards submitted.
But for the benefit of the council, this is our annual CDBG process. We've actually initiated the whole process starting back in December of 2011, where we actually solicited invitations to apply for the CDBG funds that are actually allocated to the city on an entitlement basis. And we actually closed the application process around February 17th of this year. At the last council meeting, you actually appointed 2 members to serve on the actual committee that's going to review all applications, determine the eligibility, determine if those applications, once determined eligible, fit within the goals and policies of the city, and then rank accordingly, and then determine the appropriate funding level. The actual selection committee meeting, I'm told, is scheduled for tomorrow. And we're actually hoping that we can, as a result of that meeting, make recommendations and funding levels at the next city council meeting. This year's award is slightly higher than last year's. It's about 1.2, almost $1.3 million that you're going to be responsible for determining how to be reinvested in the community. The applicants before you tonight have all submitted applications. They've put together a lot of information that gives a very detailed background about their operation, and what their goals and objectives are, and what they would intend to do with the monies that they're applying for. So one of the things that we do encourage is for this public hearing is that to the extent possible, or to the best extent possible, they focus their comments on things that would be new, that might not be in the application already, that would help help assist the selection process.
Thank you. I do have three cards to speak at this item, and remind everyone that comes forward that we do have a 3-minute limitation. The first one is, I believe it's Gary Matten. Is that correct?
Yes. Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members, I have submitted my application to the City Clerk through a miscommunication on our part. We missed the deadline, and I was told that to come and at least offer our application tonight and speak for my 3 minutes. First of all, let me say that as a current recipient of a very small portion of your CDBG funds, I neglected to say that I'm the director of the 2-on-1, United Way 2-on-1 system. And as a current recipient of a small portion of your CDBG funds currently, I'm delighted to hear that the city will still be here next year. So, and in an environment like this where people are struggling and economic times are difficult, and we know that even before the 2008 economic difficulties began, there weren't enough resources to meet the need. It is only smart business to streamline the process of getting people connected to those resources that are available as quickly as possible, especially those resources that aren't local. To bring them into your local community to assist those that are struggling to get back on their feet. And that is the specialty of the 2-on-1 system, and that magic 3-digit phone number that people can call to get connected to thousands of resources that are available to the residents of Victorville and the county of San Bernardino. So I submit my application for this next funding cycle for CDBG funds, and I hope that you'll accept it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Deborah Davis. You actually had 2 cards for the same item, so.
Yes. Okay, I appear before you this evening on behalf of Legal Aid Society of San Bernardino. And as happened with 211, we received conflicting information as to the due dates on the application. Our application was not submitted, and we were invited to bring one this evening and submit it to council. I have one here. I would like to just read one portion of it that I feel really emphasizes the need for the legal services here. The city's own established strategic plan priorities include a need to address public services, as well as a specific drive to preserve existing housing stock, eliminate blighted conditions and substandard housing, create safer and more environment and more accessible neighborhoods, and stimulate economic growth. The legal aid program that we choose to submit to you will allow pursuit of not one, but all of those priorities. The city's most vulnerable residents, those living in abject poverty, those who cannot easily read, understand, and write pleadings, those who face comprehension, language, and transportation barriers, and yet are embroiled in dilemmas, will have the ability to explain their woes, secure guidance tailored to their needs, and receive step-by-step help to attain the relief needed from the court. These services are not available through any other program. The Court Self-Help Center cannot give the advice or develop a case strategy, and no other legal providers can address the broad span of legal needs and the ever-increasing number of residents that need our help. We have a program that's been well established here since 2000. Our contributing grantors' pot of money has decreased. We desperately need your support to leverage with other funds to allow us to continue to bring services into Victorville. I do have an application here that I'd like to give to the clerk. My director was about to mail you some letters of clients who are from Victorville and have expressed their desire for these continued services. I offered to just carry those up here, and I'd like to give those to the clerk too, and to invite you to ask any questions that you may have of me at this point.
Questions?
Again, this is my error and a miscommunication, and I implore you to consider the application so that your residents do not suffer the consequences of my error. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to item 18? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. What's the next step, Keith?
Well, I think the next step is, now that the public hearing is closed, you can consider the requests of the public, or you could certainly leave that at the committee level. Our next step along the process is to conduct the committee meeting to review the recommendations that staff has already put together for the committee, and then start advising on policy with respect to funding levels in preparation of the next council meeting.
And that committee meeting is tomorrow at 1 o'clock, as I understand. Okay. Thank you.
At this point, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I think you would close the public hearing.
I did.
And, okay.
Yeah.
And I believe that's all on that item. So we could get our council members from the back. Keith?
All right, now we'll now move on to agenda item number 20, the consent calendar.
Motion by Councilmember Vyas, second by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrialis.
Brandon? No.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, agenda item number 21 has already been dealt with. Agenda item number 22 is request for council to accept the mid-year budget review of economic and financial conditions and accept the mid-year budget revisions and year-end projections. Mr. Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Adele Mosier, the Assistant Director in our Finance Division. She heads up our Finance Division, has a brief presentation, but before she gets started, I would like to comment that as we went into the mid-year budget review, we are attempting to maintain the previous policy direction of the City Council with regard to the use of reserves. So to the extent that we had some additional revenues, or excuse me, we had additional reserves available at the end of last year, more so than we had anticipated. It fortunately has an offset to some takings from the state that we were also not anticipating at the time. So Adele, please.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. This presentation will cover the mid-year budget review. We'll be going over the financial status, our budget versus our actual reports as of February 29th of 2012. We'll also be reviewing the mid-year general fund budget revisions. We will be looking at increasing some expenditure and decreasing some revenues. We will also be reviewing the economic indicators for our local economy. Our status of our expenditures, we're pleased to report that the general fund departments have been very cautious and very cognizant in looking at their expenditures, and so we ended the year December 31st of 2011 at 47% expended of the budgeted amounts, and as of February 29th, we're at 64%. So we're very pleased with the careful budgeting that the departments have done, the general fund departments. All other funds are within reasonable tolerances, and we have some additional appropriations that will be needed that we'll be discussing later. This is our revised general fund expenditure projections at the mid-year. We have 3 different items that have been requested for additional appropriations. The first one is our Green Tree Golf Course, and we have Chris Jones from Billy Casper that will be giving a brief review of that additional appropriation of $150,000.
Good evening, Council. A quick review of where we stand year-to-date compared to plan. As far as golf rounds go, we are on a pace right now to be up 8,000 rounds versus prior year. So we are projected to do 43,000 rounds this year, which is 8,000 ahead of prior year's fiscal. So do have some positive momentum going there. Unfortunately, the average per player is down. So that's what we're struggling with right now, is the getting the average rate up. We are going into season now, so we are looking to
lift the mic, would you please?
Sorry about that. Is that better? No. So we are working on pushing the rate now. Expenses are in line. We are within $20,000 of expenses. The major downfall is a revenue shortfall, which predominantly is assuming the food and beverage operations in November and the startup costs were more than anticipated, as well as event bookings and day-to-day business is much below our original projections. Of the $150,000 that we need, the $33,000 of it is due to BCG. We haven't taken a management fee in 4 months. So we have shared in the pain with the city of managing cash flow. The bright side of all this is we are still looking to finish about $500,000 ahead of prior year. The subsidy last year was $860,000. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. $860,000. This year we're looking at about $350,000 to $375,000. If you have any questions at this time.
I think you've done a pretty good job. This was a $1.3 million drain on our general fund, and to get it down to this level this quickly, I mean, even though hopefully we would have had a bit better schedule and getting to zero, you've done a good job so far. Everything's in progress, but coming down this low, this small of a number and adjustment, I think you're still on track to do a great job for us. Thank you.
So even with this request, it'll still be lower than last year?
Yes, yes. The thing to keep in mind, though, for last year is we had west winds as well. So that does factor in. West winds was about $460,000. But when you look at it, when you combine the two, the amounts of rounds we were doing, we have managed to move all of the west winds players over to Green Tree. And to see this kind of rounds growth, I believe 2008, 2009, you did 28,000 rounds at Green Tree, and we're going to do 43,000 this year. So we are headed in the right direction. It's just been slower than we anticipated.
Chris, did you say you intended to raise the per round fee?
Yes, yes. Now that we're going into season, it's tough to get people to come out and play in the high desert when it's 45 degrees. Yeah. So, we're going into the prime season right now, so rates are starting to get back to where they're supposed to be. We've had to discount in order to get people in the door. We're also creating events. We've got karaoke on Tuesdays, Friday night dinners. Sunday we're doing brunches. And so we are going out and creating events to get business in. One of the things that I should mention is we've been granted permission to convert the putting green behind the clubhouse into a wedding ceremony site. We'll do that in-house for the cost of doing business. So we'll hopefully turn that into a revenue stream for us, get back into the wedding business.
Remove the putting green?
We're gonna actually grow it up and overseed it and convert that into a ceremony site with an arch. And then we'll have plans for putting another putting green next to the number 1 tee, which would really clean up that area. And we've talked to the city staff about getting sod from West Winds and transporting the green over. So we're looking to, spend minimal costs and try to drive revenue.
Chris, one of the things I've noticed since you've taken over the food and beverage section of the Green Tree is an increased number of employees, which would obviously increase your costs. And can you speak to that? Because it just doesn't make any sense to me. The previous concessionaire that we had there operated it with a lot less number of employees. And I don't want to say that it's not appreciated, because they do a great job. And I was at the Hispanic Chamber last week, and they're all over the place. But quite frankly, you're asking the city to pay an additional $150,000 to supplement payroll for people that I don't think you need.
As far as payroll, food and beverage is in line. We are within $2,200 of budgeted payroll expenses. You are correct. We've actually looked at reducing the hours of operation. We've tried to open up for breakfast. We ran some point of sale reports today, utilization reports, that we just don't sell breakfast. Breakfast is a loser everywhere. So we're looking 10 to 6 for the hours of operation, Monday through Friday. Right now we've been opening at 8, trying to drive revenue. So we're reducing hours of operation, and we're modifying schedules. So you are correct in that respect. But as far as to plan, we're $2,200 over plan in food and beverage labor.
Okay. Well, I think I wanted to point that out, because as much as I think, the service is appreciated, for the city to have to pay for that additional service doesn't make any sense. And if that's something that Billy Casper wants to promote and wants to put out there, then they ought to pay for it themselves and not the city of Victorville and the taxpayers. So I can't be supportive of this additional appropriation for that very reason, because I know that the previous concessionaire did it with less staff, and they did just as well of a job.
Well, why is that? Why do you have more staff?
Well, I think it's a perception of staff. The previous concessionaire had non-paid staff on site as well. So I think that...
Give me numbers.
Okay.
What you had before and what you have now.
As far as what she had before, I'm not exactly sure. I do know that her and her fiance worked, so they were part of the staff, and he's a non-paid employee. So, if you take that at a minimum wage position for the course of the year, you're talking $25,000 right there. We operate with one bartender and one cook, and then we have a food and beverage manager who's also our sales director. So if we have an event, we do have to, you have to run food, and service is very important. So, we, as far as customer service scores, we were number 8 in the company out of 132 courses with our mystery shop scores last year. So, we are building the business. And, to your point, though, yes, labor, we are reducing labor, and we have put a plan in place for that, not just in food and beverage, but in all departments.
Do we know what we had before?
Well, I don't know, unless Doug can speak to that, but I can tell you that perception, maybe Rudy, you can talk to it as well. I don't know if other council members can talk to it. When I'm in there now, there are just numerous employees waiting to refill water, iced tea, whatever the case may be. And from a service perspective, I think that makes sense. And that's what your company's trying to promote. But my my question, my problem, my ultimate issue with this additional appropriation seems to go to the fact that we would pay $150,000 to supplement that additional staff cost. If it was for water, to water the golf course, which, by the way, I've received numerous complaints on, but it's winter time, so I kind of write it off to that. I just look at this as somewhat problematic for us to appropriate an additional $150,000 to Billy Casper Golf to help you run the golf course, when what I would normally have seen at a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce meeting as far as number of staff is twice the amount. And I can guarantee you that's the case. So to Councilmember Vias's question, where we might have had 3 people serving that group of people, we now have 6, if not more. And so I just don't understand why we would appropriate an additional $150,000 to Billy Casper Golf to run that golf course, understanding you've done a good job with what you've done, and I don't want to take away from Councilmember Rothschild's comments, but at the same time, you have way more staff than Rose Rainey did in the Grumpy Golfer. I just don't get it.
To your point, the Hispanic Chamber is a perfect example. They had actually left because of the service levels. So during that event, we had to beefed up staff in order to get them to come back. So I mean, that's I think that's very important. We got the Hispanic Chamber to come back. They had left over a year ago because they were not happy with the service levels.
Mr. Mayor, before we get too far from the question that was asked of me, we didn't have the same type of relationship with the previous concessionaire. That was simply a contract, and she ran it as she saw fit. With Billy Casper, it's a completely different arrangement, so we don't have any stats on the number of staff that she had. I will say that the transition between the two was not smooth from an information sharing standpoint. So I would expect, although it is getting to be late into March, I would expect a certain amount of learning period for Billy Casper as far as how many staff they do need in order to staff up some of those events. So I think what I'm hearing from Chris is that they are making those adjustments at this point to the appropriate staffing levels.
I agree with Ryan. I don't go there, so I can't speak to the amount of staff that you have. But obviously, if you're a private contractor, you should be aware of that. And I don't like the fact that you're a private contractor that we contract with, and then when you can't make it, the ends meet, we the taxpayers have to pay for that. So I got a big problem with that. And 2, I would rather see money being put into parks and recreation so that we have more pools and more things for our children rather than golf. I think that adults can pay for their own sport, and it shouldn't have to be tax dollars that pay for that. So that's how I feel about it. And I agree with Mr. Mayor McCachran. I don't agree with giving you $150,000.
Well, and to my point earlier, though, like I said, we have not taken a management fee in 4 months.
Well, that's poor management. That's not my problem, and that's not the taxpayer's problem.
And to speak to Councilmember Via's request or comments regarding adult sports paying for itself, actually the council and the staff believe the same way. We hired Billy Casper Golf in order to get the golf course to that point, and it has taken some time. I will tell you that the bid that was reviewed by staff and ultimately accepted by the City Council had about a 5-year plan before it got to break even, or at least very close to break even. We are in the 3rd year of that 5-year plan, and they are well ahead of that schedule that was part of their bid package. It is going to take some time, but Councilmember Baez, I think the staff and the council all agree with you regarding that adult sports should in fact pay for itself, and that's where we're headed.
And that is our goal. Believe me, we are pushing for that. And I totally agree with you, Mayor, about the labor, and we are monitoring that, and we met with the staff earlier today on that as well.
I think that you ought to look at that.
Absolutely.
Because at least 4 of us up here, and if not more, have been over there previous to you taking over the food and beverage. And, you have way too many people working. I don't think you need that many people. It's nice. I think the service is great. But I think at the end of the day, for you to come to us and ask for an additional $150,000 when you have that many people working for you, it is very problematic. It makes it very difficult for me to sit up here, I think for any of us to sit up here and say, yeah, we'll appropriate an additional $150,000 to the golf course when we expected you to come out at a net zero cost. And I think you're heading in that direction. I don't want to discount that, but I think it's very problematic that for those of us that do go over to the Green Tree Golf Course clubhouse for whatever the occasion is, a Hispanic Chamber or otherwise, I see literally double the number of employees that the previous concessionaire had. So I think that that's something that you need to take into account, because why would I appropriate $150,000 to help you pay staff salaries? Okay, we've laid off over 200 people over the last 3 years, and that just doesn't make any sense.
Right. Well, the of that money, it's not all labor. I mean, it's accounts payable. It's due to vendors for fertilizer, for gas, for everything, for all operational costs.
You need to figure that out.
Understood.
Well, I don't run a restaurant, so I don't have an idea how many people you should have, but I know that service is very important. And from before and now, I did see an improvement in the service, like Ryan says. But I think we're still under what we were spending before. I think it's important that, and I don't play golf, and I don't go to the club or to the restaurant that much, other than just for events. But I think it is a city asset for all of us, and I think we need to help you be successful in bringing that cost down to that 5-year goal of zero. And so I'm looking at maybe perhaps this can help you increase your revenues in that area. And so I don't have a problem at this time with that.
I thought when we looked at this budget last year, the idea that you were going to get by on what you originally projected was unrealistic. And I remember asking the question, are you coming back for more money? And the answer was absolutely not. We're going to make it on this. I think that was unrealistic. And I don't think we can overlook the fact that this was a program that was costing the city $1.25 million to $1.5 million a year. And with this, we're now going to be at $350,000. That's not what I would ever call poor management. I'd call it maybe not the best estimating what some costs are going to be. And I know there's been some labor cuts in places that I'd rather not see them cut, which is on the golf course. Ryan's point notwithstanding, it's your job to figure out where your labor needs to be. I am seriously concerned about this city asset. I do not see the golf course being pitted against children's programs at the pool. There's many adults that came and complained about us closing the pool as there were kids. And while the kids' programs at the pools are very important to us, junior golf happens to be a real important program in this community, as it is, I think, across the country, just as valuable as football, baseball, and others. A lot of kids aren't cut out for football and baseball, but golf is a great program for kids. Teaches them some really great values. So I don't see that as a conflict. You've taken on a big job, and I am disappointed that you've come back and asked for more money. I'm not surprised. That asset is critically important to the city, so I'm going to go ahead and support this. I'm also going to support the money for the pool.
Yeah, I echo quite a bit of what Mr. Kennedy just said, but we're in a very extremely tight budget where $150,000 is actually a lot of money. We'd love to have a 10% reserve. We're working on a 2.5% to 3% reserve. We'll probably, if we're lucky, we'll hit $1 million at the end of the year, when we should be looking at $3 million or $7 million in a good year. So to take a hit off of that kind of money, $1 million that we may be there by the end of the year, is a tough hit. This is an important asset. I think you've come a long way. For me, you've earned the spurs one time. I'm disappointed you're here asking, but your progress has also been meritorious. So I don't want to see us have this deteriorated, but I agree with the mayor as well. You've got to change a bit of your people management skills there so that we can get that number down and people can learn to work harder with fewer, just like this city has and across the counters and everything else. I'm going to support this one time, but I assure you that you're not going to get a vote to increase it again out of the schedule that you've got before you in the next 2 years, meeting that 5-year schedule of getting to zero. So I'll support it this time, but you listen to what the mayor has indicated and the other council members have indicated on terms of this. If the votes come out that you can get the additional monies, you better change it so that money is more than adequate to finish out the program for the 5 years.
I have one more comment and then a question for the city attorney. There is no comparison to golf and swim lessons because swim lessons saves lives. And when you're turning children away and children are drowning, that's a problem for me. And then I have a question for the city attorney. Is there a conflict of interest if you're an avid golf player and you are on the board at the Hispanic Chamber where they're getting great service and discounts?
I don't see any conflict. They're not being treated any differently than the public generally under these circumstances.
And then I also have another problem with the golf course competing with private business. And we're taking away from other catering businesses or the Hilton that can cater these, and the city is taking the business, and I have a problem with that as well.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, unless there's more questions for Chris, we kind of interrupted Adele's presentation because we knew this issue on the Green Tree Golf Course would be something that the council wanted to discuss. So if there's no more questions for Chris, I'd ask Adele to finalize the presentation. There's a little bit more to go. The item is presented as one overall request. If the council chooses, sounds like there may be differing opinions on at least this single item. If the council chooses, you could take that piece separately when we get to that point, or you can obviously just go with the staff recommendation as a whole. Thank you, Chris.
I have a question. These are the mid-year additions or requests. That's just for the general fund, this part here.
Yeah, this is just the general fund. Yeah. The Water District had that other request that was already approved.
Yeah, and the total appropriation actually is $93,000 because of the savings. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, Adele will get right into that right now, I think. Thank you, Chris.
The next item, for an additional appropriation is our information technology Cisco Unity upgrade. This is for the city's voicemail system. These funds will cover costs for the required professional services, licensing, and software to complete the upgrade to the city's voicemail system. And that's for $21,000. Next, we have the $48,200 additional appropriation to keep our Pebble Beach pool open for the spring and summer seasons. Then we have our, because of staff terminations and retirements, we had about $650,000 worth of savings, but there were a lot of costs. There was about $525,000 worth of costs in vacation payouts and sick leave payouts. And so our actual savings for the 11-12 year for those personnel savings was about $125,000. So that would net out to be an additional appropriation of $93,000.
Dale, if I could stop you real quick. this Cisco Unity upgrade to our voicemail system. In light of VLF and the amount that we're not going to realize from the state, why? What's the point? I mean, we have a voicemail system that probably works just fine right now, so I'm not sure. I understand 21,000 is a small amount in light of the overall budget, but I just don't get why we would spend 21,000 to upgrade a voicemail system, and quite frankly, I think the public would say the same thing.
We can have Tanya.
Actually, we're lucky enough that Tanya is handling our IT needs for today, and this is actually within her area of expertise for the city. She handles all of her telecommunications, so she's out from behind the
Tanya's been very helpful to me in the past, so Tanya, I'm not shooting the messenger here.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I mean, Green Tree Golf Course, that's one issue. Parks and Recreation and the pool, a completely different issue. But upgrading a voicemail system, why? We don't have the money right now.
It's actually, they changed the licensing. We've already were budgeted for the equipment, the infrastructure replacement. It was end of life as of February of this year. So we already have the equipment on order. The professional services and stuff, the licensing for Cisco changed in the middle of the fiscal year. So we didn't know the additional funding that was going to be needed for the professional services because we didn't know we were going to have to get new licensing. But Cisco changed the whole structure. So
Cisco did this to us.
Unfortunately, yes. And the upgrade is kind of putting back other projects that were already budgeted for because we cannot move forward with Exchange upgrades and other things to the email services and other tech infrastructure projects because both of them go hand in hand. So because we have a unified voicemail system and it's voice over IP, it also interchanges with Exchange and other infrastructure applications out there. So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your explanation to that point. Obviously, it just makes hardly any sense that we'd be spending $21,000 to upgrade a voicemail system that works perfectly fine.
No, I understand.
Thanks for letting us put you on the spot, Tanya.
No problem.
Appreciate it.
I warned her.
I do have one question, and I'm sure it's not going to affect, I don't think it's going to affect this year, but the CalPERS actuaries and the board agreed to lower the projected earnings rate from 7 3/4 to 7 1/2, and they're talking about a staggering effect on all municipalities and all participating entities in CalPERS as far as our increase in liability. Do you have any clue what effect that's going to have on Victorville?
I don't.
Not yet.
We'll have to wait till we get the rate calculations from CalPERS. Probably within a couple of months, we should have that for next year's budget.
Our status of our revenues, our two top revenue generators here in the city is our property tax, which is 32% of our general fund, and our sales taxes, which is 35% of our general fund. And we'll talk about them a little bit more in detail when we talk about the economic indicators. As mentioned before, we do have the loss of our VLF revenues. This was effective July 1st of 2011 when the State Assembly Bill 89 eliminated the VLF revenue allocation to the cities, and we don't anticipate that coming back until there's a change in law.
Adele, let me interrupt you right there. I actually got emailed today from the League of Cities, and the League of Cities filed a lawsuit against the state regarding the taking of these VLF revenues under both Prop 22 and 1A being protected by the citizenry. That actually goes to hearing on May 4th, and they are anticipating a fairly quick time frame as far as a turnaround on the decision on that out of the courts. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get a decision just before July 1st, and if it's favorable, then we can budget appropriately. But as of right now, we're going to budget assuming that we will not have the VLF again next year.
Can we all assume that since we're losing this revenue that the state reduced everybody's license fees? Is that what they did?
I haven't seen that in mine.
You mean the state is just keeping this money that was ours?
Yes.
Is the answer yes?
All right, we'll go on to our next slide, which is our budget gap and our use of reserve. As you can see, we started the year out anticipating that we would have the budget, the unappropriated fund balance or the reserve fund balance of $2.2 million. When we actually, when we finished our fiscal year and we have the actual numbers, that is now $3.1 million. So that's what's actually in our reserves as of June 30th of 2011. So we can take that number and we can use it to anticipate what we would end the year with these additional appropriations. We still have the $1.6 million that was approved at budget time. We have an additional $425,000 that was approved prior to the mid-year as additional appropriations. And then we have these three items and then the savings. All in all, with using that actual rather than the estimated number, we only are about $13,000 additional revenue or the amount that we would have left in our reserves at the end of the year.
So I had indicated my comment was that we had about would you back up one? Mm-hmm. That we had about $1 million in reserve. I was not figuring the 400,000 loss of the VLF. Okay, that would make the $1 million. Okay, if we get it back, then we basically are looking showing about $1 million maybe. Okay, that's unfortunate. I didn't see that one going.
After all, stay with that one, please.
Okay, sorry.
After all the doom and gloom we've heard earlier today, how do you account for the fact that our reserve fund balance is $900,000 higher than what we had expected?
To me, that's, the departments being very fiscally responsible for the expenditures that occurred last year. They, were lower than we had anticipated. And so, we saw that result. And I can't say typically that's what happens, but, we are very fiscally responsible, with the departments, and they are very conscientious of, the expenditures.
Might be some good management.
That's what I'd say. Can we go on to the next one? And now we'll go into our economic indicators. We do have the Victorville's assessed valuation on taxable property declined by 9.8% for fiscal year 10-11, but that compared to the 17% decline in fiscal year 9-10, at least we're hoping to be leveling out there. We also have the high unemployment still within the Victorville city. That's currently at 14.4%, but that is a decrease of 3.1%. So we're going in the right direction there. San Bernardino, California, and the nation always have a better unemployment, a lesser unemployment rate than we do. The next one is our housing market. We've looked at the median price range for Victorville, and that dropped to $110,000 in 2011 from the $119,000 that it was in 2010. We do have some good news in 2011, the Inland Empire's share of the underwater homes declined from 54% to 43%. So we're, looking at those underwater homes working through the system. The 2015, it's estimated that in 2015-16 will be the probable time frame for the influence of those mortgage prices to have worked through the system. So we have a few more years that we need to, before we even out.
Do we have any statistics on what portion of the homes in Victorville are underwater? This is a percentage of the underwater homes in the county that. No.
I don't have any right
We don't know. Okay.
Then we have the consumer confidence. It's at 64.8% right now, which is, it was 55.2% as of December of 2011. And when I looked today, February, it went up again to a little bit more to 70%. And so our consumer confidence is increasing. Our sales tax receipts were up 6.87% from the third quarter of 2011 from the third quarter of 2010. Auto sales are up 17% from third quarter 2011 from the third quarter of 2010, and that is a huge component of our sales tax receipts. Our next steps in looking towards our budget for the for the 12-13 year is to continue to practice conservative fiscal discipline and also to develop strategies that will enable the general fund to establish a budget for the revenues equal or surpass the expenditures. And this concludes our presentation.
All right, Doug, is this receive and file, or?
No, there's actually an additional appropriation as a result, so we will need a motion and a vote on this.
Oh, I'd like to make a motion to separate out the 150,000.
Is this motion to approve the
Motion.
additional appropriations also?
You want to separate just that one item?
Just that one item. Isn't that what you suggested?
That's one option before the council. You could separate that individual appropriation out separately if you wish to vote one way on the overall, and then a different way on that individual item. You could do that.
All right, so we have a motion to separate the 150,000 appropriation to the Green Tree Golf Course. I'll second that motion. Because this is not on the computer, I'll call for a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we will separate that item. So let's go ahead and take the rest of the mid-year budget review for approval. I'll entertain a motion on that.
We actually have a motion on the
Okay.
floor, Councilmember Kennedy, and the second by Councilmember Rothschild.
Okay, I'm confused.
We're just voting on the rest of the mid-year, not the 150,000.
Motion carries unanimously.
Carry that next. And then next we'll entertain a motion, and I'll do this via voice.
Yes, please.
This is for the additional $150,000 appropriation for the Green Tree Golf Course. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrialis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Wait.
All those opposed?
This is the
150,000
for the golf course.
Okay, I'm opposed to that.
I am as well, so it's 3-2 vote with Councilmember Valles and myself voting against. So it's 3-2. Do we have that?
Yes, I have that recorded.
All right, then we will move on to agenda item number 24. This is a request to approve a service provider agreement with LSA Associates, Inc. in the amount of $105,000 to complete the required environmental documents in order to begin construction of the Mojave Riverwalk project.
Mayor McEachran, I would ask that your motion include the ability for minor non-substantive changes by city manager and city attorney.
All right, we will so note that. I will entertain a motion on this item.
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrialis. Motion carries unanimously.
Agenda item number 25, this is a request to revise the Measure I 5-year capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2008, 2009, 2009, 2010, and 2010, 2011 to identify in the plan past expenditures for the Mojave Drive I-15 interchange project for the Measure I Arterial Regional Fund and Measure I Local Fund, all in amounts of $60,000 for each fiscal year in each fund.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrialis, second by Councilmember Rothschild. Motion carries unanimously.
Agenda item number 27 is a request to, 1, reaffirm the authorization to execute the purchase agreement and escrow documents for NSP acquisition of real property, APN 3104-421-23 and 3095-133-07, 2, to approve an appropriation from the Neighborhood Stabilization Program income and NSP 3 funds in the amount of $192,000 for the purchase and other associated costs to acquire the properties, and 3, designate the Assistant City Manager as the authorized signer of all related transaction documents.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Cabrialis, second by Councilmember Kennedy. Motion carries with Councilmember Vias voting no.
Mr. Mayor, on item 28, it is part of your agenda. It's in your agenda packet. However, staff inadvertently left the item number and the item description off of the index for the agenda. We apologize for that, but there is that item is in your agenda. That's the council committee reports.
All right, and to that, we'll go ahead and have our council committee reports with respect to the committees that we serve on. Councilmember Rothschild? No? Member Kennedy? Member Vias?
For the Victor Valley Transit Authority, we're having our grand opening on April 20th at 11 a.m. There's also going to be a sandbag meeting there. So anybody who would like to come, I would say come out and see the new facility. It's quite nice.
With respect to sandbag, have any of you been driving on the I-15 lately? Because if you haven't, I'm sure you've seen the interchange under construction. So the only thing I would ask, and I'll repeat this at every council meeting, is that you drive slowly on Mariposa and Armagosa roads. There are new stop signs. There's construction workers out there. We need to pay attention to those signs and be safe with respect to that project. So please drive safely around and near that project. Yeah, well,
that's progress.
Dorothy, if I could control the wind. Yeah. Anyway, all right, we'll move on to council reports, discussion and possible action regarding items for the upcoming city council agendas. Ms. Vias?
Yes. You know, during the week, I start to think about where are we at on all of these things, like the CMEX project with Santa Clarita. What happened with the red light cameras? I know the last time they said that we couldn't get out of that ironclad contract. And I mean, how much longer? I get a lot of questions from constituents, like how much longer do we have on those contracts? When is it going to come back? What's going on with the report for the homeless? When's Walmart coming back? You know, when are we going to get the information on the RDA staff? Just things like that. I'm wondering if we can get some updates, because it's like it just disappears and then we never hear about it again. And I get the questions, and I don't know how to answer them.
Right. The RDA staff issue, I'm just kind of going backwards, first one that came to mind. That was on the last agenda, and as I've explained on several occasions now, when you give staff direction on one agenda or at one meeting, it's nearly impossible for us to report at the next meeting because of the agenda deadlines in order to prepare the agenda. So that item will be on the April 3rd agenda. The homeless report issue, I am working on myself when I have time, and I don't have a lot of that, but it is an important issue, and I have met with both probation and the parole departments, and without giving away too much information, I've found out some very interesting things that I am anxious to get back to this council. There's some other projects that are in the works as part of that report, and I don't have a schedule for that yet. The RDA, I talked about the RDA staffing issue. What was the other ones?
The red light camera?
Red light cameras, I would turn that over to the city attorney. I don't know exactly where that is.
There has been a lot of litigations throughout the state recently, and a lot of public press about red light cameras. Still to this date, there is no court case that has deemed the red light camera itself unconstitutional. What they are doing is overturning tickets primarily based on the failure of the evidence, the failure or the inability of the ticketed people to confront the people that are testifying as to the adequacy of the cameras. We are monitoring it. At this time, there is no case that would allow us to avoid the terms of the existing contract. The contract mandates that the city continue with that program until our court deems the red light cameras unconstitutional. So we continue to look for that. We continue to share correspondence and have been getting correspondence from Brandon Wood and continue to monitor to see if there's any case that gets us to that point. To the extent there is a case like that, we will bring it to your attention. It will give us the opportunity to avoid that contract.
How long do we have on the contract?
Off the top of my head, I don't recall. I can get that to you and send you an email. I have to look at the contract. I don't have it in front of me.
I vaguely recall it was 2014.
Sounds about right.
I think.
If
you would get that to the
We're the
forecast.
target of a class action lawsuit on this topic, are we not?
We are.
Well, I mean, should we be agendizing a topic that we're a target of a class action lawsuit?
The class action lawsuit was basically a claim was filed. The city's risk manager looked at the claim, denied the claim. The suit has not yet filed, naming the city at this point that I'm aware of. It's been talked about, the class action suit. The initial analysis is that actually they don't have the appropriate grounds to file the class action suit, but to the extent there's any exposure, we'll immediately inform the council and agendize it if that in fact occurs.
Regarding Walmart, that is not on the calendar just yet. I know it's getting close. It will not be on the April 3rd agenda. It may be on the April 17th agenda. If not that one, it will be very soon thereafter, I would imagine. Regarding CMEX, after getting direction from the council, I know that the mayor had some discussions or attempted discussions with the city of Santa Clarita, as well as some of the other supporters and potential opponents. And I don't know that we are proceeding with a presentation at this point, just based on maybe a lack of clarity on what exactly is happening with that bill. Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'll clarify, and for the council's information, I reached back out to the city of Santa Clarita and specifically their mayor, Lori Ender, and she not only did not return my call, did not return my email. I have more or less been told by Congressman McKeon's staff, and it's my understanding that this bill is dead on arrival. It's not going anywhere in the Senate. Senator Boxer failed to acknowledge some of the changes that Congressman McKeon's staff wanted in the bill. And so for that reason and many others, TXI Riverside being opposed to it, it's not going anywhere. So I think it was just inappropriate for us to waste our time here. So to that issue, unless I hear more, and I will definitely share with the council if I do, but I've reached out to the parties that are involved, and no one's responding. So there's no reason for us to have a workshop. Okay.
Mrs. Tabor brought an issue to the council, and I've had some phone conversations and made that suggestion. And since they have on this business of the damaged house in Brentwood, I'd like to ask staff to come back to the council and give us some idea of how that gets handled, if that's agreeable with everybody.
All right, next we'll have reports from staff and council members. Mr. Robertson.
Just a couple of things. At the meeting 2 weeks ago, I talked about the potential for a commemorative brick program to possibly do some public art. I was able to speak at the Chamber of Commerce breakfast the following morning and had a lot of positive comments. There seems to be a lot of interest in it, so we're going to continue to pursue it. and to the extent that it's something that can fund itself, we'll bring it back to this council. If there's not enough support, then we'll look at possibly doing something else. On the dais today, in fact, it just came in literally this afternoon, was some of the commemorative pins that we'll hope that you'll wear, at least for this year, that commemorate the 50th anniversary of the city. I misspoke 2 weeks ago and was corrected by, in fact, I did notice that it was all ladies that pointed out the fact that I called it the silver anniversary. It's actually the golden anniversary. And the pins add a little bit more gold than our typical pins have for that very reason. So we are going to continue moving forward with that. At this point, we are still trying to put a program together as far as what the dinner might look like and what the presentation will look like. But in discussing it with some of the more senior members of our community who've been here for a long time, I think what we will likely end up doing is use some of the funds that are raised in order to do a commemorative video, sort of like you might see on History Channel, that interviews, rather than only one person who might be able to give a keynote, interviews a lot of the folks that are still around who were involved in the incorporation of the city, and at least the first few years getting the city off the ground. As I mentioned, I'm not interested in trying to outdo the college in their roll through the decades. They did a fine job with that with their students, so I think I want to focus this presentation on preserving some of the history of Victorville's incorporation. So we're going to continue moving forward with that, and I will be speaking to various community groups trying to push that program. Additionally, in addition to the pins, we're working with a local vendor to also make some shirts that will be available to the council and staff and potentially the public if you really want a shirt that has the city logo on it. And that, again, will be at no cost to the taxpayers. That's strictly an optional item for staff and council. And one last item to mention, 2 weeks ago, you'll recall Jim Anderson was here talking about a CFD bond, and there was some concern expressed about how well those bond sales might go, and could he actually sell those bonds. And I'm pleased to announce that actually there was tremendous interest in them. There was requests for considerably more bonds than were available, and as a result, that had the effect of lowering the interest rate that the residents will now be paying as a part of that CFD. So ultimately, their taxes for that CFD go down. They've been paying those taxes since they moved in, but now that there's a final bond issue and final numbers, their taxes will actually go down as a result.
Doug, is that any kind of indication that Foxborough bond this might be a good time to refinance it?
No, sir, it's not. I wish that we could build on that success, but that actually is a completely separate issue from the city, as Mr. Anderson explained 2 weeks ago. The bond sales were not reliant on anything happening within the city as far as financially.
Ms. Fies?
I just like to make another comment, and I know the council doesn't care, but this agenda was very difficult for me to go through when we get it. I get it Thursday night. The city's closed Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so I have Monday and Tuesday, which I work full-time, to really get any information, and I just wish that we could get the agenda in a little bit more time so I feel more confident when I make these decisions.
Two things, and this is just, my perception on two items. They may need to come back from staff level. I became aware of yesterday that there is a Planned Parenthood application being submitted here in Victorville for the what would be the old Chuck E. Cheese over there off of Park Avenue or Anacapa. And I just want to voice my concern and my objection to that. Although they have indicated, from what staff has told me, that it's just an office and they're not going to perform. abortions, I know Planned Parenthood way too well, and that's exactly what they will do. That facility is too large. They will ultimately attempt to do that. And so I would request that planning staff look at bringing that through the Planning Commission process, where ultimately, if it needs to, it can come to the council level. Secondly, there's a business, Majestic Recycling, that is actively taking recycling materials from businesses in our community under the auspices that they're donating the money that they get back to our schools. And although that has merit, my concern is that that ultimately will drive up rates to our ratepayers, those that pay those trash and recycling fees, including all of us up here. If we don't have enough recyclables for our current company that handles that to pay those fees. So I'm concerned about that. I would encourage staff to look into that. We may or may not be able to do anything about it, but at the end of the day, if staff comes back to this council with a request to increase rates because we have some private company out there taking away from the very company that we have agreed to do business with on good terms to handle recyclables here in the city of Victorville, then I think we have to address it. So I have some serious concerns about that. But
the health and safety component to that.
Well, and yeah, I mean, obviously there are state laws regarding recycling, and perhaps our city attorney can address those issues. But unless they're complying with those state laws, you know, as good as their intentions may be, my concern ultimately is to the ratepayers. The ratepayers are ultimately going to see increases to their rates, and they're going to come back to this council and say, well, we have to increase your rates because we have XYZ company over here or ABC company over here, you know, taking away from the very thing that you as a council approved this company to take care of for you. So I think we've got to address it. Mike, you sit on the MRF board. You know probably better than I how that might affect us, but I think we need to look at it.
The more fuller we can make our Blue Barrel, the more efficient and cost-effective the trash hauling business is. So the end game in a perfect world is you want everything going into a Blue Barrel and nothing winding up in a Green Barrel. When you start taking out of the Blue Barrel, in effect, you start taking those assets that we've learned how to break down and begin to use in different ways. You're right.
Mr. Mayor, I can respond to that briefly if you would like. This was brought to my attention a couple of months ago. Actually, Majestic Recycling representative contacted me to meet with him regarding the issue. And ultimately, I did meet with him. We engaged both the city attorney's office as well as Burtech and their legal counsel. And the short answer, and I'm happy to ask the city attorney to provide a more detailed response if you'd like. The short answer is that as long as Majestic Recycling is not charging for the services, it is not violative of the franchise agreement that we have with Burtech. It's not considered waste at that point. So it ultimately could have the effect, and staff recognizes the fact that it could have the effect if they in fact collect recyclable materials that we currently charge a fee in order to collect and dispose of through recycling, that could have an adverse effect on rates. At this point, state law does not give us any grounds to stop that operation. We have been working with both Burtech and with Majestic on trying to put together some kind of an ordinance that would be enforceable, which is the tricky component of it, that would address some of the concerns that have been expressed tonight.
Okay. Well, as long as it's being worked on, I just think it's important that we address it, because I really would not like this council to have staff come back and say, oh, by the way, we're going to have to increase rates to your ratepayers. We're asking you to vote to increase those rates because we have a private company out there taking recyclables from the very company that we have already authorized to do so. So With that, there's nothing else I have, so we are adjourned.